In 2012, Snapped featured the story of Taylor Marks, who once enjoyed a privileged upper-middle-class life in Akron, Ohio.
She was a child who was used to getting whatever she needed.
Christy was a wonderful mother to her, was a very devoted mother.
But when mother and daughter began to clash, one of them would pay the price.
911 was your emergency. My mom was just stabbed.
This assailant stabbed her a remarkable 16 times.
I thought, no, there's got to be something wrong here.
Now serving a life sentence at Ohio Reformatory for Women, Taylor is ready to tell her side of the chilling tale for the first time ever.
I've been wanting to get my story out there. I'm sick and tired of you calling the mastermind.
She was very easily manipulated. I think she was very gullible.
You want to call me a spoiled brat? Go ahead, because you don't know me at the end of the day.
Accusations against Taylor turn from spoiled child to cold-blooded killer.
Taylor's not this innocent little kid who hatched a plan with her classmates to steal some candy.
I'm not a dangerous person, for real, for real. My mom aggravated me, and I said something I shouldn't have said.
Stories just aren't right. She's definitely trying to make herself look as good as she can.
I wouldn't pay him to call my mom. I love my mom. I didn't want this to happen. I was trying to save her.
Nearly a decade later, will Taylor's conscience finally get the best of her?
Guilt is a really strong emotion. Your mind plays out all of the things the person has done for you.
It hurts, but it's my fault at the end of the day. My name is Taylor Marks, and I wanted to do this because I want people to know the truth and not just think that I'm the mastermind behind it, because I wasn't. It really wasn't intentional. I really didn't mean for this to happen, and I really didn't want anything bad to happen to my mom.
You know, Taylor can sit in prison and say that she didn't intend for her mother to be killed, but she's the one that set things in motion, and at the end of the day, Taylor has to take responsibility for her actions.
Akron, Ohio, October 24th, 2009. It was a little before 8 when the city's 911 center received a frantic call.
911 was your emergency. My mom was just stabbed.
The caller was 20-year-old Taylor Marks.
Taylor's hysterical on the phone, saying that somebody stabbed my mother, and we need help quick.
He came out of nowhere, ran up on her and stabbed her. Who is she? My mom. He pushed her to the ground. Okay. Who did? Some guy, I don't know. Okay, I need you to calm down. Wait a minute, ma'am. Is there someone else that's here on the phone?
Taylor handed the phone over to her boyfriend, Brian Smith.
He tried to cut me, and then he ran up the damn street. I chased him. Couldn't catch him. The was running like a damn crackhead.
The dispatcher passed the information on to the responding units and then urged Brian and Taylor to sit tight until help arrived.
I need to know, is your mom breathing? I don't know. He's all right. Please get there. We're going to get someone out there, okay?
As first responders raced to the scene, it was clear Taylor and Christy's lives would never be the same. Born in 1989, Taylor had been adopted as an infant by Christy Marks and her husband, Bruce.
Marks, Bruce, and Christy couldn't have children, so they adopted. And they adopted Taylor when she was young.
They had a very good lifestyle, I would say upper middle class.
They pretty much gave Taylor what she needed and then some. So Taylor lived pretty well, and I know that they loved her.
But when Taylor was 13, the family's idyllic lifestyle was upended by her father's sudden death.
Her father's death in 2002 changed Taylor tremendously. She was Daddy's little girl, and now Daddy was gone.
My dad died August 31st. He had low blood sugar and passed out into a diabetic coma. My mom and I came home from riding horses that day, and we both found him on the garage floor. I ran for the phone. My mom went to him. We tried to save him and couldn't. And it broke me.
The death of a parent especially when a child witnesses it. It has an effect on you traumatically because it takes away your security. And if I don't have this person anymore, who do I go to?
Taylor's mother did her best to fill the void.
By all accounts, Christy was a wonderful mother to her, was a very devoted mother.
There was nothing that Christy wouldn't do for her daughter.
She wanted dance lessons, she got them. She wanted cheerleading lessons, she got her cheerleading lessons.
I mean, she gave everything to Taylor that she asked for. I mean, Taylor, bottom line, was spoiled.
Okay, so my mom did spoil me, but people don't understand the things that came with being spoiled when it came to her. Stuff was the thing that she did to try to make things better. It was like, okay, so you're feeling this way. Hey, let's buy this. Let's buy that. My mom was a very, she liked objects. And I'm not that person. I don't care about money at the end of the day. I care about friendships, love. So you want to call me a spoiled brat? Go ahead, because you don't know me at the end of the day.
There's nothing wrong with buying your children things. There's nothing wrong with giving them objects, but there has to be structure and there has to be balance. And that wasn't happening.
But less than a year after her father's passing, Taylor would have another father figure in her life to help provide that structure and balance.
Christy Marks, I met shortly after her husband had passed away. We just met online. We started going out. I found her to be one of the sweetest women I've ever met. Taylor was the daughter I didn't have. She would listen to me even over her mother. I tended to be the voice of reason when Taylor and Christy would get into an argument over anything.
And according to Taylor, those arguments became more frequent after her father's passing.
It escalated when he died because of how close me and my dad were. Anything I did would set her off when nobody else was around. If my hair wasn't a certain way, my clothes weren't a certain way, my makeup wasn't on, she downgraded me for it.
You know, there's always shades of gray. Christy could be very possessive, and if she didn't want something, she could be just as stubborn as anyone else.
My mom wasn't really the person everybody thinks she was. When my mom got mad at me, she would throw it in my face that I was adopted. It just got messy. I don't know what was going through her head.
Taylor's increasingly floundering grades proved another point of contention between her and Christy.
I have learning disabilities. I'm ADD, ADHD, and dyslexic. So when it comes to schooling, schooling is the worst thing for me. I am very bad at it.
She's putting that label on herself that she can't do the work, and those labels follow you throughout school. So it's going to be hard to pick up academically.
In 2008, Taylor finally finished high school and began attending a local university. But she continued to struggle.
I ended up going to Akron University, and college was not for me. I'm not very book smart. I can't really write an essay very well. I'm not that type of person.
Taylor dropped out of college. She didn't really want to be in college. She just did it to placate her mother. There was no drive there. She didn't really want to be there. Taylor was just a lost girl that didn't know what she wanted to do.
Without the structure of school to keep Taylor in line, things only got worse between mother and daughter.
I wanted to stay out later. She wouldn't let me. I wanted to stay over friends' houses. She wouldn't let me. She just controlled every aspect of my life. She wanted me to fit into this little ass mold that she had for me. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be my own person, and she wouldn't let me.
To Christy's dismay, Taylor had also fallen in with a troublesome new group of friends, including her new boyfriend, 21-year-old Brian Smith, a tough kid from the housing projects of North Hill.
He was different from any of the other guys I met. My mom wanted somebody for me that was going places and was working and doing everything that they're supposed to do, and Brian wasn't that. I knew he was the type of person my mom didn't want me around, so I was doing everything that she didn't want me to do, so I was gonna go for him.
At that point, I think Taylor got together with Brian to get back at her mother. You know, I'm going out with this really bad guy. I'm going out with this guy from the other side of the tracks. And, you know, there you go.
Concerned about Taylor, Christy barred Brian from the house. But all she succeeded in doing was driving the wedge deeper between her and her daughter. Early in 2009, Taylor left the suburbs behind and moved in with Brian.
I just didn't want the rules of my mother breathing down my back. I wanted to start to grow and be an adult, and my mom just did not want that to happen.
She wanted to be free from her mother's influence, and Christy Marks was very upset about this.
A mother never stops being a mother.
But 2 months later, on October 24th, 2009, Christy got a call from Taylor that made it seem like she might be ready to reconcile.
Taylor tells her mother, "Can you please come pick me up? I'd like to come stay at home. I'd like to see the dogs."
Christy was elated with this. You know, she felt like her daughter had really turned and that she was trying to make amends with her.
That night, Christy Marks went to pick up her wayward daughter. However, their reunion would be cut short. Just 1 hour later, Akron police were rushing to Christy's aid after receiving a chilling 911 call from Taylor and Brian.
Someone just ran up on my mom and stabbed her. Okay, try to keep her as comfortable as possible.
When officers arrived on the scene, Christy was still alive, but barely holding on.
She was stabbed more than a dozen times. Just, you know, a slaughter. It was a bloody, horrific crime scene.
Coming up, first responders fight to try and save Christy's life.
I was scared out of my mind when everything was going on.
But was Taylor scared for her mother or herself?
I was trying to survive myself through all this. Things just started spiraling. I was crying my eyes out for real.
On the night of October 24th, 2009, Akron police had just arrived at the scene of a gruesome attack, where 58-year-old Christy Marks had been repeatedly stabbed outside the home of her daughter's boyfriend.
When the police showed up, she was still alive. When they took her to the hospital, told them everything she was allergic to, you know, was trying to save her. They did try to get me to go with her, but I was scared to go with her because I was scared out of my mind when everything was going on. I just didn't want nothing else to happen to anybody else I cared about.
Unfortunately, there's nothing EMTs could do to save Taylor's mother. She's pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital.
When I first heard the news of what happened with Christy, I was shocked. I was like, I can't believe this happened. But I thought, no, there's got to be something wrong here. How could something like this happen, you know, with Christy?
She was stabbed 16 times with a knife that was just so horrible and so violent.
For investigators, the nature of Christy's wounds suggested a crime of passion.
Stabbing is more intimate, it's up close and personal. There's no doubt about that. The guns you can do a little further away. At least with a knife, you got to be up close and personal.
Police fanned out, searching the housing project for the murder weapon and any other evidence that could lead them to the killer.
And about 2 apartments down, we found the victim's purse, $7 in cash, and all her credit cards and her other belongings.
Just a short distance away in some bushes, they found the murder weapon.
A kitchen knife, like a steak knife. Could have came from anywhere.
Meanwhile, detectives learned that Taylor and Brian weren't the only 2 individuals that witnessed the attack. Their friend, 19-year-old Troy Purdy, also saw what happened.
I interviewed each of them separately in a different part of the house to get their statements, so they don't hear
what the other person is saying.
When investigators speak with Taylor Marks, she tells them that she had called her mother earlier that evening to pick her up.
She was claiming that she wanted to come home and that she was missing her dogs.
The last message I left her was that I loved her and I missed her and I couldn't wait to see her. That was the last thing I said on her voicemail.
Christy jumps in the car to go and pick up Taylor. And unfortunately, Christy never makes it home that night.
According to Taylor, the attack occurred just minutes after her mother arrived, as Brian walked them to the car.
And we walk out the door, and I saw Lucy and Hannah in the car, and I got sidetracked because I hadn't seen my babies in a long time, and I ran to the car to see them. He came running around the house and said, "Give me your purse," and knocked her down off the side and started stabbing her to death.
Taylor told investigators that basically after mom was stabbed, that the perpetrator just bolted from the scene.
He runs past Brian and her up the hill.
Interviewed separately, Brian's story mirrored Taylor's.
He says that some unknown person runs from behind the apartments, kind of pushes him to the side, pushes Christy over this little half retaining wall, and then repeatedly stabs her.
Brian said that when he had tried to get the masked man off Christy, the attacker had turned on him.
He got cut on the finger. He claimed that he ran after the perpetrator and he couldn't catch up with him.
He has to stop because he's having an asthma attack.
That's when Troy Purdy said he had joined the pursuit.
Brian starts screaming for help from Troy, and Troy says he ran out of the apartment.
Troy runs out of the house, passes him, and takes off after the suspect, who he never sees. Troy himself says, "I never saw anybody, I just keep running."
All three accounts of the attack appeared to agree. But there were several things about the story that didn't seem quite right to investigators.
The man that stabbed her took the purse, but then dropped the purse with money, with the car keys to a brand new SUV, and took off, which doesn't make sense. If you're robbing someone, you're going to continue robbing them.
There was also the fact that, of the three people in the parking lot, Taylor, Brian, and Christy, the attacker had only focused on Christy.
One of the big things that stood out was the fact that there were 3 people in the parking lot that night, and this assailant actually went and attacked the 50-year-old woman and did not even make any attempt to steal anything, but in the process stabbed her a remarkable 16 times and just took off from the scene right after the attack.
That's not a robbery. They meant to kill her.
Investigators immediately suspected that Taylor and her friends were somehow behind the murder, concocting the bogus story about a masked robber in order to cover their tracks.
All the stories seemed like they were rehearsed. Like what he was telling me was the same thing Troy was telling me, and it just didn't sound right.
That night, investigators asked Taylor, Brian, and Troy to come down to the station for a more formal statement. It was, they told the trio, simply a routine procedure.
Come down, give us a statement, give us some DNA, and we can then take you off our suspect list.
What investigators needed was one of the 3 to roll over on the others.
We brought Brian in first. We brought Troy in second. Went through their stories.
Both men stuck to their initial statements that Christy Marks had been killed by a masked robber.
I yelled, "Get off her." He swipes his knife at me. I yelled, "Get off of her" again, and he jumps the wall and takes off. I'm looking for the truth. That's all I'm looking for. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm telling you all I know, sir.
Getting nowhere with Brian and Troy, investigators turned to Taylor. But would they get her to crack?
When I was in the room with the detectives, I just didn't care anymore. I was tired, I was wore out, I was mentally just beat down. I was just over it. They told me my mom was dead, and the last I knew she was alive, so I really wasn't in the right frame of mind to even make a statement.
Coming up, the police press Taylor for answers.
Somebody set your mama up.
I don't know who would do that to my mom.
And investigators uncover a chilling surveillance tape.
I mean, the police can say what they want, but I was screaming and yelling at both of them to stop.
On the evening of October 24th, 2009, Akron, Ohio investigators had 3 individuals in custody for the brutal stabbing of 58-year-old Christy Marks, including her daughter Taylor and Taylor's boyfriend, Brian Smith.
So, along with Taylor and Brian, they also had Brian's friend Troy Purdy in custody, and they were all claiming that this was a robbery, and a random robbery at that.
They thought that we were going to buy into what they told us. The stories just aren't right, you know. For it to be a robbery in my eyes, you have to take something. They took nothing.
With both men sticking to their account of the so-called robbery, everything came down to Taylor.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand that? Mm-hmm. You have the right to talk to your lawyer and have him or her present with you while being questioned. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Taylor waived her right to an attorney, and detectives started ramping up the pressure.
They start leaning in on Taylor to hopefully get her to confess. I mean, they tell her flat out, we don't believe you. We think you're lying to us.
I didn't do it.
Then tell me who did.
I don't know who did it.
We're gonna be stuck for a while then, girl.
When I was in the room with the detectives, I kept telling them that I wanted to go home, and they wouldn't let me go. I just felt like they were more pressed in getting answers than letting me get my mind right and calm down to be able to answer them the correct way.
Somebody set your mama up.
I don't know who would do that to my mom.
I got an idea.
Who didn't do that to her?
Somebody who wants her money. Your dad deceased, right? You don't have no brothers or sisters. So who do you think would naturally think they would get that money?
Backed into a corner, Taylor's story slowly began to change, and she eventually launched into a more detailed description of her mother's attacker.
He has braids. Tight braids. Not normal whistles.
You have to.
More like.
You have to tell me what happened there.
More like.
Who is the guy?
Troy.
Was it Troy? Did Troy kill your mother?
She won't say yes, but she'll shake her head yes. She says she's afraid of Troy. She doesn't want Troy to know that she told.
I was scared of him, and I wasn't trying to make him mad. I was trying to survive myself through all this.
She wasn't sure of what they would think about her, what they would do to her. And that fear of not knowing can be very paralyzing. So in her case, being able to say, yes, he did it, but not being able to verbalize it, it keeps her safe, and it keeps her from actually having to say it, but letting someone know that this happened.
You're gonna have to tell me what happened.
He's talking about killing her because
Why?
she's racist. I'm always racist.
Had Troy killed Christy Marks, a woman he barely knew, because she was racist? Investigators didn't believe that story for an instant.
I take Troy back to my desk to play what she just said. Taylor, she pushed you and stabbed her mama. Here's the last time she says it.
Confronted with Taylor's confession, Troy broke down. He admitted to stabbing Christy Marks, but claimed it had nothing to do with race.
Plan was, I kill her, I get paid, I disappear from the picture.
How much were you supposed to get paid?
$5 grand.
Who was gonna pay you?
She would.
Who's she?
Taylor.
It comes down to it. The whole deal was that he was gonna get $5,000 to kill Taylor's mom, Christy, from the life insurance money or from the estate. Who was with you when you were talking about this?
Taylor and Brian.
After his confession, the police placed Troy under arrest for the murder of Christy Marks. Then they brought Brian back in.
I'm going to tell you that Troy admits that he stabbed this woman and killed her. I'm also going to tell you that he says that your girlfriend offered to pay $5,000. Now, do you want to tell me the truth or not?
Can you cut that off?
Yeah. He wants to continue to talk, but he knows it'll be recorded. He knew that Christy was going to be killed that night when she came over. This cut he claims he got on his finger, and he finally admits that he cut himself earlier that day. Nothing to do with this incident.
The police placed Brian under arrest for murder. Then they returned to deal with the most important member of the conspiracy, Taylor.
Troy says that you were going to pay him $5,000 to kill your mom.
No, I wasn't.
I don't think Troy made something up just to kill your mom out of the clear blue sky.
I don't want my mom dead. I was gonna go back and live with my mom. I tried to lie. I felt like if I told the truth, it wasn't gonna get me anywhere. It was just a very sticky situation.
And he was supposed to be paid $5,000.
I don't have that kind of money.
Well, you sure would now if you were the only family member left, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't pay him to kill my mom. I loved my mom.
At that point, detectives had heard enough. They arrested Taylor and charged her with aggravated murder.
When they arrested me, I kicked the door telling Pasilic that I didn't feel good, and he told me that I shouldn't have killed my mom. So, you know, it's life.
Taylor's friends and family were shocked when they heard the news.
I was like, I can't believe that she would do something like this. I mean, I know she would get, she would get upset with her mother, but to do something like this, I didn't believe it.
Meanwhile, investigators continued to build their case against the three suspects.
Detectives receive a phone call from a security guard, actually, at the housing authority where the crime took place. And he tells the detectives, I have a video of the actual incident.
The footage was grainy, but it showed Taylor standing by idly as Troy stabbed Christy.
You could see on the videotape where his little arm was going back and forth, then you could see him run away.
To show that to a jury, it would definitely shock them a little bit to see that. To see, a daughter stand over her mom while she's getting stabbed.
So when it came to that surveillance video, it shows that I am standing there. But here's the thing, I am 5'2", and I was only 120 pounds against two men that were twice my size and 3 times my body weight. They would have also hurt me in the process. So, I mean, the police can say what they want, but I was screaming and yelling at both of them to stop.
But had Taylor really been trying to stop the attack? Or was she simply watching her plan unfold? Coming up, investigators learn Brian and Troy weren't the first individuals Taylor asked to help get rid of her mother.
There are crazy people in the world that want to be part of stuff like this.
This is somebody who for months tried to hire somebody to kill her own mother.
She had made mention that she wanted to hire a hit person to kill her mom.
I didn't know how to stop it.
In October of 2009, Taylor Marks, Brian Smith, and Troy Purdy were under arrest for the gruesome murder of Taylor's mother, 58-year-old Christy Marks.
Taylor and Brian actually offered Troy Purdy $5,000 of the insurance money to commit this crime.
And in questioning Taylor's friends, investigators learned that Troy Purdy wasn't the first person Taylor had asked for help.
2 different people said that she had made mention that she wanted to hire a hit person to kill her mom. She wanted her mom dead. She offered a friend her mom's house if she ran over her mom with her van.
It's an accusation Taylor denies.
Whoever said that I came to them and asked them to help me kill my mother, before this is crazy because I would never ask them to do something like that. I feel like they just wanted to be a part of something as ludicrous as this because there are crazy people in the world that want to be part of stuff like this.
This was a premeditated murder. This wasn't a situation where somebody under the influence of alcohol or drugs suddenly snaps and kills somebody. This is somebody who for months tried to hire somebody to kill her own mother and ultimately found somebody who was willing to take a mere $5,000 to do it.
That was why, when Taylor Marks was formally indicted on November 5th, the prosecutors announced they would be seeking the death penalty.
It was a murder for hire, and our laws specifically say if somebody hires somebody to kill somebody, that makes this case eligible for the death penalty.
When I faced the death penalty, I was scared. I was crying my eyes out, for real.
For anyone, facing death is something that you don't really think about until you're older. But for a young girl to hear the words death penalty, then now it becomes a reality and it makes you to really start thinking about not being on this earth anymore.
We also sought the death penalty against Troy Purdy because he was the one who actually stabbed and killed Christy Marks.
Brian Smith, however, managed to dodge the death penalty, but faced a life sentence.
We didn't feel that he was eligible for a death penalty because he wasn't the actual person who stabbed and he wasn't the person who was going to be paying the money.
In August of 2010, Troy Purdy cut a deal with prosecutors.
After multiple meetings with the family members and relatives of Christy Marks, we did make an offer to Troy Purdy to plead guilty to life with no possibility of parole. And he did, in fact, accept that offer.
Would Taylor do the same? That August, Detective Jim Pasilich received a series of seemingly urgent phone calls from Taylor.
Middle of August, Taylor calls from the jail several times, leaves a message that she wants to talk to me.
So I did contact Detective Pasilich for the simple fact that my mom did deserve justice. I did feel guilty because I knew what Troy was about to do and I didn't know how to stop it.
The guilt really started to eat away at Taylor. And guilt is a really strong emotion. Your mind literally plays out all of the things that the person has done for you, and it plays out over and over.
On August 16th, 2010, Detective Pasilich sat down with Taylor Marks in a conference room at the Summit County Jail. In the interview, Taylor admitted that she, Brian, and Troy had talked about killing her mother.
How many times do you think you guys talked about killing your mom? More than 5 times?
Probably.
But even as Taylor admitted her role in the murder, she attempted to shift the blame onto her boyfriend, Brian Smith.
He was the backbone of everything, so without him, the whole thing would have...
I mean, like, what else was he doing?
Oh, he just planned everything with Troy. He was the brain. Brian was the actual mastermind behind all of it, for real. My mom had made me so mad that I said that I wish she was dead. That was just an irrelevant statement. I didn't mean it. And then Brian took it literally and things just started spiraling.
According to Taylor, Brian was the one who wanted her mother's money.
Brian wanted me to marry him and all this other stuff, and he knew that I was my mom's only child, so if something happened to her, I would end up with everything. He's the one that initiated everything. I never forced him into doing any of this.
I really think that Taylor was probably, angry at her mother and said, my mother is this and my mother is that. And I think that Brian and his buddy kind of put this into her, well, we can get rid of your mother so she's never going to yell at you again. And we can get the insurance money and you'll have all the money that you want.
I didn't think that he was going to follow through, but he did.
Taylor was very young and naive, so she absolutely could have been pulled into that dynamic of, okay, go ahead and do it, but not really having that reality that you are going to do it.
You have the right and the wrong, and she chose the wrong. And in my opinion, you don't do that if you're a loving daughter.
However, Taylor told Detective Pasilich that when Troy began to stab her mother, she had tried to stop him.
I told him to stop and told Brian to get him off her. I screamed, stop, stop. He wouldn't stop. And I was crying. I told Brian to get him off of her, and he wouldn't get her off of her. She was scared. She screamed why and didn't understand.
But according to Taylor, her mother eventually realized she'd been set up.
She said, I love you and you're forgiven. I remember it was hard to understand what she was saying, but I understood, and just because I know my mom, if that makes any sense at all. I wasn't expecting to be hysterical.
Well, I don't think anybody's prepared to see somebody get killed right in front of them, let alone their mom.
Especially a loved one.
Coming up, Taylor begs for mercy.
I'm remorseful over it. I cry every day in my cell. I think about her every day.
But is she remorseful now?
It hurts, but that's because of the choices I made, and I can't be mad at them for that.
August 16th, 2010. Almost a year after being charged with conspiring in the murder of her own mother, Taylor Marks had finally admitted her role in the plot to Detective Jim Pasilich. But she put most of the blame on her boyfriend, Brian Smith.
I'm not a dangerous person for real. My mom aggravated me and I said something I shouldn't have said, and Brian took it literally and ran with it.
She's definitely trying to make herself look as good as she can.
I'm remorseful over it. I cry every day in my cell. I think about her every day. You should make sure he gives you a plea bargain.
I can't offer
It's up to
nothing.
the prosecutor, isn't it?
It's up to the prosecutor.
Although, according to the prosecutor, the ultimate decision was up to Christy Marks's family.
We could propose a resolution of the case for life with no possibility of parole, or if the family members were not agreeable to that, we would go forward as a death penalty case.
The family decided to show mercy.
They believed that Christy would not have wanted to see Taylor die for committing this crime. And so the family, I believe, felt like they were doing something for Christy by showing that little bit of mercy.
They didn't show me mercy. Not that I feel like, because I would have probably ended up with the freaking life without parole regardless, because in the judicial system, you have to offer a plea deal at some point. That's not mercy, spending the rest of your life in prison. No one deserves to spend the rest of their life in prison.
Taylor accepted the prosecutor's deal, pleading guilty to aggravated murder in exchange for life without parole.
So I pled out because I didn't want to put my family through a trial. It had nothing to do with me, it had everything to do with my family, and if anybody thinks otherwise, then they don't know me.
Brian also pled guilty to the aggravated murder, and the judge did in fact give him life with no possibility of parole, same as the other two.
Justice had been served, even if people still struggled to understand how things could have gone so wrong.
It wouldn't surprise me if her boyfriend and the other guy manipulated her and said, you know, hey, if your mom somehow ends up dead, you're gonna inherit all the life insurance money, you'll be rich.
She was very easily manipulated. I think she was very gullible, and obviously, she could be easily led down the wrong path. Taylor is not, some hardened criminal that could never be rehabilitated, that would never want to contribute to society. Taylor is a woman that's gone from a troubled teenager to a woman who's realized that what she did was horrible and that she can't change it.
If you could talk to Brian today, what would you say to him? That I hate him. I would tell Brian that I hate him for not manning up and taking responsibility for what he did and what he wanted to do and for roping me into all this. I feel like Troy really didn't know what was going on for real. I don't know if he had his own issues and took it out on my mom, but I feel like Brian is a coward and didn't have the guts to take the rap for what he initiated.
You know, Taylor likes to play the I'm innocent card, but at the end of the day, I mean, Taylor's not this innocent little kid who hatched a plan with her classmates to steal some candy. She set up a murder. And not only that, she set up a murder of her mother. I don't think there's anything more awful that you could possibly do.
My mom didn't deserve anything that happened to her. My mom did not deserve the choices that I made. I should have listened to my mom, because at the end of the day, regardless of what she's done to me, she did care, she did love me, and in her own way. And I realize that now. Like when I'm sick, she took very good care of me, and I miss that. Or when my heart was broken, she tried to put it back together. She had really good advice when I needed it, and in here it's hard because I don't have my family or friends anymore. And it hurts, but that's because of the choices I made, and I can't be mad at them for that. It's my fault at the end of the day, even if I didn't plan it.
One of the things I think everyone should know, if you're having trouble with your family, deep down, they all love you. They may not know how to show it, they may not know how to express it, but it's there. You have to dig down. You have to make the effort to come together and solve your problems, not go off and do something you're going to regret for the rest of your life.
For Taylor, that regret still haunts her to this day.
My family not only lost my mother, but they lost me as well because I'm here. Everybody deserves a second chance. I hope someday that they can forgive me for my actions. I do miss them, I do care about them, and I still love them to death.
Florida 1987 cold case cracked. A retired detective's instinct changes everything. Nobody in Ashcroft remembered the exact day fear arrived. They only remembered that it never truly left. It settled over the town like the humid Florida air that clung to every porch, every abandoned gas station, every stretch of highway disappearing into endless pine forests. It lingered in conversations that stopped the moment strangers walked by. It hid behind locked doors and drawn curtains. It survived generations, refusing to fade even as children grew into parents and parents became names carved into weathered cemetery stones. Some stories die with time. Others simply wait. On the morning of October 18th, 1987, the sun climbed over the marshland exactly as it had every autumn before. Fishermen launched their boats before dawn. A delivery truck rattled down Main Street, carrying fresh bread to the only grocery store in town. Church bells echoed across empty sidewalks. It looked like another quiet Sunday in a place the rest of America barely knew existed. By sunset, everything had changed. At 6:42 p.m., the emergency dispatcher answered a call that began with silence. Not screaming, not panic, just breathing. Heavy, uneven, terrified. The operator asked twice if anyone was there. Nothing. Then came 4 words. I found her truck. The line went dead. Deputies reached County Road 14 less than 11 minutes later. The pickup sat half hidden beneath towering oak trees draped with Spanish moss. Its headlights were still glowing against the fading daylight. The driver's door remained wide open. No driver. No passengers. No blood. No obvious signs of violence. The engine had gone cold. A handbag rested neatly on the front seat. Inside were a wallet, driver's license, folded grocery receipts, a paperback novel, and $23 in cash. Nothing appeared stolen. The keys were missing. The radio continued playing soft country music to an audience that no longer existed. At first glance, deputies believed it might be a breakdown. Then one officer noticed something unusual. The truck had not been parked. It had rolled slowly into the ditch. The front tires pointed sharply away from the road, as though someone had jerked the steering wheel during the final seconds before abandoning it. Search teams spread to the surrounding woods before darkness swallowed the landscape. Flashlights swept over palmetto bushes. Bloodhounds followed faint scents before circling back in confusion. Helicopters searched from above. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a discarded shoe. Not a single cry for help. The woman who owned the truck had simply disappeared. Within 24 hours, every newspaper in 3 neighboring counties carried the same headline: Local woman vanishes. Community baffled. No suspects. No one imagined they were witnessing the opening chapter of a mystery that would haunt Florida for decades. Because this was never just about a disappearance. It became something much darker. Something that refused to stay buried. The missing woman was 34-year-old Caroline Mercer. Friends describe her as predictable in the best possible way. She never missed church. Never ignored phone calls from family. Never drove unfamiliar roads after dark. She worked as the assistant manager of a small hardware store. Where customers joked, she remembered every face that walked through the front door. If someone needed paint, Caroline knew exactly which shelf. If an elderly customer struggled to carry lumber, Caroline found help before they asked. She remembered birthdays. She mailed handwritten thank you cards. She fed stray cats behind the store. People trusted her. That made what happened even harder to understand. According to witnesses, Caroline had left work shortly after 5 o'clock, carrying nothing more than groceries and a birthday card she planned to deliver to her younger sister. She never arrived. The drive should have taken less than 20 minutes. Instead, somewhere between civilization and home, her routine ended forever. Investigators reconstructed every mile of her final known journey. They questioned cashiers, gas station attendants, mail carriers, teenagers hanging around convenience stores, retired couples walking their dogs. Nobody remembered anything unusual. No screams, no crash, no suspicious stranger. It was as if the road itself had swallowed her. Rumors arrived long before evidence. Some believed she had run away. Others whispered about gambling debts that never existed. One story claimed she had secretly planned to leave town with another man. Another insisted drug traffickers moving through northern Florida had mistaken her for an informant. Each theory spread across diners, churches, barbershops, and high school football games. Each collapsed beneath the slightest examination. Her bank account remained untouched. Her passport stayed inside a dresser drawer. Every piece of clothing still hung neatly inside her bedroom closet. Nothing suggested preparation. Nothing suggested escape. Only absence. Investigators searched lakes, drainage canals, abandoned orange groves, construction sites, old wells. Miles of woodland disappeared beneath organized search grids. Volunteers worked until exhaustion forced them home. Some returned every weekend for months. Parents brought teenage children to help. Veterans who had searched battlefields combed the forest shoulder to shoulder with local farmers. Hope slowly transformed into routine. Routine transformed into despair. Weeks became months. Months became years. The case file grew thicker, while the answers grew fewer. Evidence technicians preserved everything they could: hair fibers, soil samples, latent fingerprints from the truck, tiny fabric threads caught beneath the driver's seat, dozens of cigarette butts collected near the roadside. Every item entered storage. Every label carefully handwritten. Every box sealed. Back then, nobody realized those forgotten boxes would someday become more valuable than gold, because science had not yet caught up with the mystery. The sheriff leading the investigation was Harold Briggs, a patient man with silver hair and 30 years behind a badge. He believed every missing person left a trail. Sometimes investigators simply failed to recognize it. For nearly 2 years, Briggs refused to close Caroline's file. He re-interviewed witnesses until they could recite their own statements from memory. He recreated her final drive at sunrise, again at sunset, again during heavy rain, again in complete darkness. He measured stopping distances, timed traffic lights, counted passing vehicles. He became obsessed with one question. Why there? County Road 14 offered nothing. No businesses, no houses nearby, no scenic overlook, no reason to stop voluntarily, unless someone made her stop. Yet there were no tire marks proving another vehicle had blocked the road, no broken glass, no shell casings, no signs of struggle, only an empty truck waiting beneath silent trees. The investigation stalled. State agents arrived. Federal authorities reviewed the evidence. Behavioral analysts developed profiles that contradicted one another. One predicted an organized predator. Another suggested someone Caroline already knew. Another claimed the disappearance was accidental. Each report ended with uncertainty. Years rolled forward. Children who once watched search helicopters from school playgrounds graduated college. Businesses closed. New ones opened. Sheriff Briggs retired. The evidence boxes moved from one storage room to another. Dust gathered. Labels faded. The town stopped asking daily questions. But it never stopped wondering. People avoided County Road 14 after sunset. Hunters claimed they felt watched in those woods. Truck drivers accelerated through the area without knowing exactly why. Parents invented harmless ghost stories to keep children from wandering too far. Fear became folklore. Folklore became tradition. Then, almost 35 years later, someone opened a forgotten evidence box. Not because of a miracle, not because of a confession, because one retired investigator could never convince himself the story was over. Daniel Reeves had joined the sheriff's office in 1985 as the youngest detective on the department. Caroline's disappearance became his first major investigation. He remembered every sleepless night, every failed lead, every conversation with grieving relatives, every promise investigators made that they would not give up. Promises are easy to make, much harder to keep. Reeves eventually retired after decades of service. He hunted, fished, spent mornings drinking coffee on his porch. But one thing refused to leave him, the Mercer file. Every few months, he drove past the old evidence warehouse. Sometimes he simply sat in the parking lot, looking, remembering, wondering what everyone else had missed. He knew retirement was supposed to mean letting go. Instead, memory tightened its grip. One rainy afternoon, while sorting old notebooks stacked inside his garage, Reeves found something that instantly made his heartbeat quicken. A hand-drawn map, yellowed with age, covered in notes. Small arrows, measurements, observations written in fading blue ink. One sentence circled 3 separate times. Vehicle position doesn't match witness timeline. He stared at those words for nearly a full minute, because he suddenly realized something. Back in 1987, everyone had assumed the truck marked the place where Caroline disappeared. But what if it wasn't? What if it had been left there deliberately? Not as the scene of the crime, but as the beginning of a lie. Outside, rain hammered against the garage roof. Inside, a retired detective unfolded a mystery the world believed had already reached its dead end. Without realizing it, he had just taken a first step toward uncovering a truth that someone had spent 35 years desperately trying to keep buried. Blackwater County, 1987. The cold case that refused to die. There are places where people lock their doors because they're afraid of strangers. Then there are places where they lock them because they know exactly who lives down the road. Blackwater County was the second kind, hidden among endless stretches of pine forest, abandoned citrus groves, and narrow two-lane highways that seemed to disappear into the darkness. It was the sort of town where every pickup truck looked familiar. Every face had a name, and every family carried secrets they never intended to share. Outsiders called it peaceful. The people who lived their new peace could be the perfect disguise. Everything changed on the evening of October 11th, 1987. The weather forecast had promised scattered rain, but the storm arrived earlier than expected. Thick clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight, and by 6 o'clock the sky had turned the color of wet concrete. Wind rattled the old storefront windows along Main Street. Neon signs flickered to life one by one. The local diner filled with its usual crowd, retired mechanics, off-duty deputies, truck drivers passing through. Conversations drifted lazily between football scores and fishing reports. Nothing about the evening suggested that Blackwater County was about to become the center of a mystery that would survive for decades. At exactly 6:53 p.m., the sheriff's dispatcher received a phone call that lasted only 19 seconds. The caller never gave a name. The voice sounded calm, almost too calm. You should send someone to Mill Creek Bridge. A pause. She's still there. The line went dead. No explanation. No panique. No background noise. Just silence. Deputy Carl Jensen happened to be less than 5 miles away when the dispatch came through. Expecting little more than a disabled vehicle or a possible accident, he drove toward the bridge with his emergency lights flashing against sheets of cold rain. The road was nearly empty. Water pooled across the cracked asphalt. Tree branches bent under the force of the wind. He saw the car before he reached the bridge. A pale blue sedan rested on the shoulder, with its headlights still burning into the darkness. The driver's door stood wide open. The windshield wipers continued moving back and forth across dry glass. The engine was still running. The radio played softly. No one was inside. Deputy Jensen approached cautiously, flashlight cutting through the rain. The driver's purse sat untouched on the passenger seat. The keys remained in the ignition. A half-finished cup of coffee rested in the center console, still warm. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared damaged. The scene looked less like the aftermath of a crime and more like someone had simply stepped away for a moment, except no one ever came back. The registration identified the owner as 29-year-old Emily Carter. Emily worked as a bookkeeper at Blackwater Farm Supply, a business that had served the county for nearly 40 years. She lived alone in a modest white house on Cedar Lane with an aging golden retriever named Rusty. Friends describe her as dependable, organized, almost predictable to a fault. Every Friday, she visited her parents for dinner. Every Sunday, she attended church. Every morning, she stopped at the same gas station to buy the same brand of coffee before work. Not without leaving behind questions. Not without leaving behind evidence. Search teams assembled within the hour. Deputies searched both sides of Mill Creek Bridge. Volunteers formed lines stretching into the woods. Firefighters launched small boats into the dark water below. Divers searched the creek until nearly midnight. They found nothing. No footprints leading away from the road. No signs of a struggle. No discarded clothing. No blood. Even the heavy rain failed to explain the complete absence of clues. It was as though Emily Carter had dissolved into the night. By sunrise, word had spread across the county. Church parking lots became gathering places for anxious conversations. The grocery store bulletin board filled with photocopied missing person flyers before noon. Teachers noticed students whispering instead of paying attention in class. Parents insisted their children come straight home after school. For the first time in years, front porches sat empty after dark. Fear had arrived quietly. It intended to stay. Sheriff Thomas Hale understood something the television reporters did not. Disappearances rarely remain mysteries forever. Someone always talked. Someone always noticed the wrong car, the wrong phone call, the wrong lie. The challenge was discovering which detail mattered before memories began to fade. Detectives started where every investigation begins. Family. Emily's parents insisted nothing unusual had happened. She had called her mother that afternoon to confirm dinner plans for the following evening. She sounded cheerful. Relaxed, normal. Her younger brother described her as careful almost to the point of stubbornness. If Emily said she'd be somewhere at 7, she was there by 6:50. Friends repeated the same description again and again. Responsible, reliable, private, no hidden relationships, no gambling debts, no criminal associations, no reason to disappear. Investigators examined her finances. Every bank transaction matched her routine. Every paycheck had been deposited. No unexplained withdrawals. No mysterious purchases. Her passport remained inside a bedroom drawer. A suitcase sat untouched in the closet. Nothing suggested preparation for a new life. Attention shifted toward her workplace. Employees described an ordinary Friday. Emily had balanced invoices, answered phone calls, laughed with co-workers during lunch, left shortly after 5, carrying a leather folder containing payroll records she planned to finish over the weekend. That folder was never found. At first, detectives dismissed its disappearance as coincidence. Later, they would wonder whether it had been the only thing the person responsible actually wanted. The first witness emerged 2 days after Emily vanished. A long-haul truck driver remembered passing the blue sedan approximately 15 minutes before deputies arrived. He noticed another vehicle parked behind it, dark-colored, older model, possibly a station wagon. He could not identify the make, could not describe the license plate. Only one detail remained clear in his memory. The driver's side door had been open. Someone appeared to be standing between the two vehicles. Rain blurred everything else. Investigators searched registration records for every station wagon in 3 neighboring counties. Hundreds of interviews followed. None produced a suspect. The anonymous phone call became the next focus. Telephone company technicians traced its origin to a payphone outside an abandoned convenience store nearly 12 miles away. No fingerprints. No surveillance cameras. Nothing. The caller had chosen the location carefully. Close enough to report the abandoned car. Far enough to disappear before deputies arrived. Whoever made the call knew exactly how much information to provide. Enough to start the investigation. Not enough to solve it. Weeks turned into months. Every promising lead collapsed beneath closer examination. Psychics claimed to see visions. Treasure hunters insisted Emily had uncovered hidden money. Conspiracy theories spread through diners and barbershops. Some believed she had witnessed drug trafficking. Others whispered about corruption inside the sheriff's office. None of it survived the facts. Sheriff Hale refused to chase rumors. Evidence. He wanted evidence. Unfortunately, evidence remained stubbornly absent. The county organized volunteer searches nearly every weekend. Horse riders combed trails. Helicopters scanned swamps. Divers returned repeatedly to Mill Creek. Hunters checked remote cabins. Logging crews searched areas inaccessible by vehicle. Nothing. The woods offered no answers. Winter arrived. Then spring. The missing person posters slowly faded beneath sun and rain. Television crews moved on to newer tragedies. National interest disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. Blackwater County was left alone with its questions. Inside the evidence room, cardboard boxes multiplied. Photographs, interview transcripts, maps, fiber samples, soil collected from Emily's tires, latent fingerprints lifted from the steering wheel, dozens of items carefully labeled, carefully preserved, and carefully forgotten as the years slipped away. One detective, however, refused to let the file gather dust. His name was Daniel Cross. At 32, he was younger than most investigators in the department, but already carried the reputation of someone who noticed details others overlooked. He rarely raised his voice, rarely accepted easy explanations. While others searched for dramatic breakthroughs, Cross spent nights reading interview transcripts line by line, looking for contradictions no one else considered important. One sentence caught his attention. A gas station clerk remembered Emily stopping for coffee at exactly 5:27 p.m. She was alone. She appeared distracted. When he joked that she looked like she'd forgotten something, Emily smiled politely and replied, "I just need to meet someone before heading home." That single sentence changed everything, because nobody had ever mentioned a meeting. Not her family, not her coworkers, not her closest friends. Detectives immediately revisited everyone who knew her. The answers only deepened the mystery. Who was she meeting? Where? Why had nobody known? Even stranger, Emily never wrote appointments on scraps of paper. She kept an immaculate planner. Every birthday, every bill, Every lunch, every doctor's visit, documented. The planner found inside her home contained no meeting for October 11th. Someone she trusted, someone unexpected, or someone she intended to keep secret. Cross requested permission to examine every public telephone record available. Thousands of calls, thousands of names, thousands of dead ends. Months disappeared beneath paperwork. Then another detail surfaced. 3 different witnesses remembered seeing the same unfamiliar station wagon driving through town repeatedly during the week before Emily vanished. Always alone, always moving slowly, always near places connected to Emily's routine. The grocery store, the church parking lot, the farm supply office, Mill Creek Road. No one had reported it because nothing about the vehicle seemed remarkable at the time. Only afterward did the pattern become impossible to ignore. Cross-pinned photographs across an entire office wall. Road maps, timelines, witness statements. Colored strings connected locations like veins beneath human skin. Most detectives saw chaos. Cross believed the truth was already there, hidden, waiting. He kept returning to one impossible question. If Emily had been targeted, why leave the car in plain sight? Why not destroy it? Why make the anonymous phone call? Why allow investigators to discover the scene so quickly? Unless the abandoned sedan had never been intended to hide the crime. It had been designed to control the story. Someone wanted detectives to begin their search at Mill Creek Bridge. Someone wanted every resource focused on the woods, on the water, on the surrounding roads, which meant the most important evidence might never have been there at all. Late one evening, long after everyone else had gone home, Daniel Cross stood alone beneath the humming fluorescent lights of the evidence room. He opened box number 17. Inside lay dozens of ordinary objects sealed nearly a year earlier. Receipts, photographs, a coffee cup, Emily's leather appointment book, a folded payroll ledger that had been recovered from beneath the driver's seat during the original processing of the car. He stared at it for several seconds. The report described as water damage and apparently blank. No one had looked at it twice. Cross carefully unfolded the brittle pages. The paper appeared empty, but as he tilted it beneath the harsh white light, faint impressions emerged across the surface. Not ink, pressure marks. Someone had written on the page above before tearing it away. Cross's pulse quickened. He switched off the overhead light and aimed a flashlight across the paper at shallow angle. Letters slowly emerged from the shadows. A name, half a phone number, and one sentence that changed the investigation forever. If anything happens to me, the indentation was almost invisible. Daniel Cross held the paper between 2 fingers, afraid that even the slightest pressure might erase what time had spared. The evidence room fell silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Dust floated to the narrow beam of his flashlight, drifting like ash through still air. He angled the page again. The first line sharpened. If anything happens to me, the remaining words dissolved into shallow grooves that refused to reveal themselves. He reached for a graphite powder kit, one of the oldest techniques investigators still use to recover pressure writing from damaged documents. Slowly, carefully, he brushed the surface. More letters emerged. Not enough for certainty. Enough to raise questions. Don't. Trust. Bridge. Cross stopped breathing. He examined the page again. The final word was incomplete. It might have been bridge. It might have been Briggs. It might have been something else entirely. The damaged paper had become a puzzle, every faint mark balancing between possibility and illusion. Most detectives would have called it inconclusive. Cross refused to. He requested high-resolution imaging from the state laboratory, but processing would take weeks. Blackwater County did not receive priority treatment. Bigger cities had murders to solve, active kidnappings, armed robberies. Emily Carter had already been missing for nearly a year. To everyone else, waiting another month changed nothing. He returned to the interview transcripts. One by one, every witness, every deputy, every volunteer. By midnight, he had covered his desk with stacks of yellow folders. A pattern slowly emerged, not in what people remembered, in what they had forgotten. Nearly every witness described Emily as calm during the final week before she vanished. Except one. Helen Brooks, a waitress at Mason's Diner, had told investigators that Emily came in alone on the Tuesday before she disappeared. She ordered coffee, barely touched it, and spent almost 20 minutes staring to the front window. When Helen jokingly asked if everything was all right, Emily had smiled, a practiced smile, the kind people wear when they desperately hope nobody asks a second question. Then she said something investigators barely noticed at the time. You ever feel like someone keeps showing up everywhere you go? The original detective wrote a single sentence beneath the quote. Witness believes subject was joking. Cross circled the line in red. What if she wasn't? The following morning, he drove to Mason's Diner. Nothing inside had changed. The cracked vinyl booths remained. The old jukebox still refused to play half its records. Coffee smelled exactly the same as it probably had 20 years earlier. Helen Brooks was still there. Her hair had turned gray. The years had softened her voice, but not her memory. She recognized Cross immediately. I knew you'd be back someday, she said quietly. You did. You were the only one who never stopped looking. Cross slid a copy of the old interview across the counter. You told detectives Emily thought someone was following her. Helen nodded slowly. I remembered something after you left back then. Why didn't you call? She looked down at the coffee pot in her hands. Nobody asked again. Silence settled between them. Finally she spoke. There was a man. Cross's attention sharpened instantly. What kind of man? I never saw his face clearly. Describe what you can. He always wore the same tan baseball cap. Anything else? He never ate. Cross frowned. What do you mean? He'd order black coffee. She pointed toward the booth beside the front window. He always sat there. Every day. Not every day. She hesitated. But every time Emily came in, the diner suddenly felt colder. Cross asked the obvious question. Did they ever speak? Never. Look at each other? I don't think so. You never mentioned this. I thought it was coincidence. Helen's voice grew quieter, until Emily disappeared. Cross spent the next 3 hours reviewing every receipt the diner still possessed from that year. Most had long since been discarded. The owner had kept only tax records. Cash transactions had no names, no signatures, no way to identify the quiet man with the baseball cap. Another dead end, or so it seemed. As he prepared to leave, Helen called after him. Detective. He turned. The man. Yes. He always left exactly 75 cents. Cross blinked. For coffee? No. For the jukebox. But you said he never played it. He didn't. Then why leave the money? Helen stared toward the silent machine. He'd put 3 quarters on top. Every single time. And then he'd walk out. Cross drove back to the station with one question echoing through his mind. 3 quarters. Not spent. Simply left behind. A habit or a signal. The state laboratory finally completed its examination 12 days later. The enhanced imaging recovered additional words from the damaged page. The message remained incomplete, but several phrases became unmistakable. If anything happens to me, he knows my routine. The don't trust the bridge. Nothing else survived. Cross pinned in large photographs beside the investigation map. Emily had expected something. Not an accident. Not random violence. Someone who knew where she went. Someone who understood her habits. Someone patient. Someone watching. The anonymous station wagon suddenly carried far greater significance. Predators rarely chose victims by chance. They studied them, learned their schedules, waited until routine became predictable. Cross expanded the timeline. He visited the grocery store, the church, the gas station, the pharmacy, anywhere Emily visited regularly. Then he noticed something strange. Every location offered an unobstructed view of the main highway entering town. Someone parked in the right place could watch nearly every movement she made without attracting attention. He marked the observation on the map. Red circles, red lines, Red arrows. The pattern resembled a spider's web. At the center sat Mill Creek Bridge. Not because the bridge mattered, because every road eventually passed through it. Autumn returned to Blackwater County. Another anniversary. Another newspaper article asking the same tire question. Where is Emily Carter? Most residents turned the page. Cross clipped the article and placed it inside the growing file. That evening, Sheriff Hale stepped quietly into his office. You've been chasing ghosts. Cross didn't answer. I admire the determination. Still silence. But determination isn't evidence. Cross looked toward the wall, covered in maps. I think someone staged the entire scene. Hale folded his arms. Meaning, the bridge wasn't the crime scene. You've said that before. I think it was theater. Sheriff Hale raised an eyebrow. The anonymous phone call. The abandoned car. The open door. The engine still running. Cross spoke almost to himself. It was too perfect. What are you suggesting? Someone wanted us to believe Emily vanished there. And if she didn't, Cross slowly turned to face him. Then we spent a year searching the wrong place. The room fell silent. For the first time, Sheriff Hale looked uncertain. Where would the real scene be? Cross glanced toward the wall. I don't know. Then how do we find it? Cross walked to the evidence board and tapped one photograph. Not of Emily. Not of the bridge. A grainy picture of the abandoned payphone, where the anonymous caller had reported the vehicle. We start with the only person we know was definitely involved. The caller? The caller. You think he was a killer? Cross shook his head. No. Then who? I think. He paused, studying the faded image. He was supposed to disappear too. Sheriff Hale frowned. What does that mean? It means someone made that call because they believed they still had time. Time for what? Cross's eyes narrowed as the pieces began aligning in a way they never had before. To leave. Outside, thunder rolled across the pine forest of Blackwater County. Neither detective noticed. Both were staring at the evidence board. Both had reached the same unsettling conclusion. For almost a year, they had assumed the anonymous caller was reporting a mystery. They had never considered the possibility that the caller had been trying to outrun it. Rain battered the windshield hard enough to erase the highway beyond the glass. Daniel Cross drove without turning on the radio. The silence gave his thoughts room to grow, and they were growing in dangerous directions. The anonymous caller, the abandoned sedan, the message hidden inside the damaged ledger. None of it pointed to panic anymore. It pointed to planning. Whoever had orchestrated Emily's disappearance had expected investigators to look exactly where they looked. Every hour spent combing Mill Creek was an hour not spent asking where she had actually been before her car appeared on the bridge. Cross unfolded the county map across the passenger seat at the next stoplight. Emily had left work at 5:06 p.m. She bought coffee at 5:27. Her abandoned car was reported shortly before 7. More than 90 minutes remained unaccounted for. 90 minutes. Enough time to drive across the county twice. Enough time to meet someone voluntarily. Enough time to become trapped. He circled every vacant property within 20 miles that had existed in 1987. Most had burned down. Some had been demolished. One remained exactly as it had decades earlier. The old Harrow feed mill, closed since the early 80s. Abandoned, private, almost forgotten. Cross remembered it immediately. The building stood less than 5 minutes from Emily's office, hidden behind overgrown pines where the highway curved away from town. Children used to dare each other to sneak inside. Hunters occasionally parked nearby during deer season. Nobody had searched it during the original investigation because it lay outside the official search radius. A radius centered on the bridge, exactly where someone had wanted the investigation to begin. The mill looked like a skeleton left standing after the rest of the world had moved on. Broken windows stared into the forest. Rusted conveyors hung motionless beneath a collapsing roof. Vines crawled over cracked concrete walls. Cross stepped inside with nothing but a flashlight and decades of unanswered questions. Every footstep echoed. Dust covered everything. Nature had reclaimed nearly every corner. Yet one detail refused to fit. The dirt near the rear loading bay was thinner than everywhere else, as if heavy tires had repeatedly crossed the same ground years ago, long enough ago that only the faintest depression remained. He crouched, ran his fingers through the soil. Mixed among leaves and dirt lay tiny fragments of blue automotive paint, not enough to identify a vehicle, enough to suggest one had struck the rusted loading dock sometime in the past. Cross photographed everything. As he stood, something caught the edge of his light. A child's marble. Clear glass with a single blue swirl inside. Impossible to ignore. He slipped it into an evidence bag. Not because he believed it solved anything, because experience had taught him that the smallest objects often survive where larger truths disappeared. The second floor groaned beneath his weight. Half the offices had collapsed. Old filing cabinets lay overturned across warped wooden floors. Most were empty. One drawer refused to open. Cross forced it loose. Inside sat a faded guest log from before the mill closed. Names. Delivery companies. Dates. Nothing remarkable until the final pages. Someone had torn out 6 consecutive sheets. Not ripped randomly. Removed carefully. Cleanly. Intentionally. The missing pages covered only 1 month. October 1987. Cross closed the book without speaking. Somebody had returned here after the mill shut down, not to steal money, not to vandalize, to erase history. Outside, lightning illuminated the forest for only an instant, long enough for Cross to notice fresh tire tracks leading away from a mill. Fresh, not decades old, recent. His pulse quickened. Someone else had been here. Not yesterday. Not years ago. Recently enough that rain had not yet washed away the edges. He followed them through the trees until they disappeared onto an old logging road. The road ended at a chain stretched across the entrance to private property. Beyond it stood a weathered farmhouse. Dark, silent, empty, or at least it appeared to be. Cross scanned the yard. No vehicles. No lights. No movement. Then, the porch swing moved. Just once. Not from the wind. From momentum. Someone had left it only moments earlier. He drew a slow breath. Anyone here? No answer. Only rain. The front door stood slightly open. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and wet wood. Furniture remained beneath white sheets. Pictures had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles where sunlight had never reached. The kitchen table held a single object, a newspaper. Today's date. Someone had been inside within hours. Cross searched each room. Nothing, until he reached the upstairs bedroom. The closet door was closed. He pulled it open. Empty, except for a cardboard box. Inside lay dozens of newspaper clippings. Every one about Emily Carter. Every anniversary article. Every renewed investigation. Every rumor. Whoever collected them had followed the case for years. At the bottom rested a Polaroid. Not of Emily. Of Mill Creek Bridge. Taken before investigators arrived. The abandoned sedan sat exactly where deputies had found it. Its headlights were already on. Its driver's door already open. No police cars. No emergency lights. No search teams. Someone had stood there before the anonymous phone call was made. Cross stared at the photograph, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. This wasn't proof of what happened, but it proved something equally important. Someone had witnessed the stage scene. Someone close enough to take a picture. Someone who had never come forward. A floorboard creaked behind him. Cross turned instantly. The hallway was empty. Another creak. Closer this time. Not the house settling. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. He stepped into the hallway. Show yourself. Silence. Rain hammered the roof. Then came the sound of the back door slamming shut downstairs. Cross ran. By the time he reached the yard, only the fading growl of an engine echoed through the trees. A pair of taillights disappeared into the storm. He never saw the driver. Only the certainty that whoever had fled knew exactly what had been left behind, and exactly who had found it. Rain battered the windshield hard enough to erase the highway beyond the glass. Daniel Cross drove without turning on the radio. The silence gave his thoughts room to grow, and they were growing in dangerous directions. The anonymous caller, the abandoned sedan, the message hidden inside the damaged ledger. None of it pointed to panic anymore. It pointed to planning. Whoever had orchestrated Emily's disappearance had expected investigators to look exactly where they looked. Every hour spent combing Mill Creek was an hour not spent asking where she had actually been before her car appeared on the bridge. Cross unfolded the county map across the passenger seat at the next stoplight. Emily had left work at 5:06 p.m. She bought coffee at 5:27. Her abandoned car was reported shortly before 7. More than 90 minutes remained unaccounted for. 90 minutes. Enough time to drive across the county twice. Enough time to meet someone voluntarily. Enough time to become trapped. He circled every vacant property within 20 miles that had existed in 1987. Most had burned down. Some had been demolished. One remained exactly as it had decades earlier. The old Harrow feed mill, closed since the early 80s. Abandoned, private, almost forgotten. Cross remembered it immediately. The building stood less than 5 minutes from Emily's office, hidden behind overgrown pines where the highway curved away from town. Children used to dare each other to sneak inside. Hunters occasionally parked nearby during deer season. Nobody had searched it during the original investigation because it lay outside the official search radius. A radius centered on the bridge, exactly where someone had wanted the investigation to begin. The mill looked like a skeleton left standing after the rest of the world had moved on. Broken windows stared into the forest. Rusted conveyors hung motionless beneath a collapsing roof. Vines crawled over cracked concrete walls. Cross stepped inside with nothing but a flashlight and decades of unanswered questions. Every footstep echoed. Dust covered everything. Nature had reclaimed nearly every corner. Yet one detail refused to fit. The dirt near the rear loading bay was thinner than everywhere else, as if heavy tires had repeatedly crossed the same ground years ago, long enough ago that only the faintest depression remained. He crouched, ran his fingers through the soil. Mixed among leaves and dirt lay tiny fragments of blue automotive paint, not enough to identify a vehicle, enough to suggest one had struck the rusted loading dock sometime in the past. Cross photographed everything. As he stood, something caught the edge of his light. A child's marble. Clear glass with a single blue swirl inside. Impossible to ignore. He slipped it into an evidence bag. Not because he believed it solved anything, because experience had taught him that the smallest objects often survive where larger truths disappeared. The second floor groaned beneath his weight. Half the offices had collapsed. Old filing cabinets lay overturned across warped wooden floors. Most were empty. One drawer refused to open. Cross forced it loose. Inside sat a faded guest log from before the mill closed. Names. Delivery companies. Dates. Nothing remarkable until the final pages. Someone had torn out 6 consecutive sheets. Not ripped randomly. Removed carefully. Cleanly. Intentionally. The missing pages covered only 1 month. October 1987. Cross closed the book without speaking. Somebody had returned here after the mill shut down, not to steal money, not to vandalize, to erase history. Outside, lightning illuminated the forest for only an instant, long enough for Cross to notice fresh tire tracks leading away from a mill. Fresh, not decades old, recent. His pulse quickened. Someone else had been here. Not yesterday. Not years ago. Recently enough that rain had not yet washed away the edges. He followed them through the trees until they disappeared onto an old logging road. The road ended at a chain stretched across the entrance to private property. Beyond it stood a weathered farmhouse. Dark, silent, empty, or at least it appeared to be. Cross scanned the yard. No vehicles. No lights. No movement. Then, the porch swing moved. Just once. Not from the wind. From momentum. Someone had left it only moments earlier. He drew a slow breath. Anyone here? No answer. Only rain. The front door stood slightly open. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and wet wood. Furniture remained beneath white sheets. Pictures had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles where sunlight had never reached. The kitchen table held a single object, a newspaper. Today's date. Someone had been inside within hours. Cross searched each room. Nothing, until he reached the upstairs bedroom. The closet door was closed. He pulled it open. Empty, except for a cardboard box. Inside lay dozens of newspaper clippings. Every one about Emily Carter. Every anniversary article. Every renewed investigation. Every rumor. Whoever collected them had followed the case for years. At the bottom rested a Polaroid. Not of Emily. Of Mill Creek Bridge. Taken before investigators arrived. The abandoned sedan sat exactly where deputies had found it. Its headlights were already on. Its driver's door already open. No police cars. No emergency lights. No search teams. Someone had stood there before the anonymous phone call was made. Cross stared at the photograph, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. This wasn't proof of what happened, but it proved something equally important. Someone had witnessed the stage scene. Someone close enough to take a picture. Someone who had never come forward. A floorboard creaked behind him. Cross turned instantly. The hallway was empty. Another creak. Closer this time. Not the house settling. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. He stepped into the hallway. Show yourself. Silence. Rain hammered the roof. Then came the sound of the back door slamming shut downstairs. Cross ran. By the time he reached the yard, only the fading growl of an engine echoed through the trees. A pair of taillights disappeared into the storm. He never saw the driver. Only the certainty that whoever had fled knew exactly what had been left behind, and exactly who had found it. The taillights vanished around the bend before Daniel Cross reached his truck. The engine roared to life. Gravel spraying beneath the tires as he accelerated onto the narrow logging road. But the storm had already swallowed every useful trace. Rain flattened the dust. Wind bent the pines until they groaned like old ships at sea. The fleeing vehicle had become nothing more than another shadow inside a forest full of them. Cross slowed. Chasing blindly would accomplish nothing. Finding answers required patience, not speed. He drove back to the abandoned farmhouse just before midnight, this time with Sheriff Hale and 2 crime scene technicians. Powerful floodlights transformed the neglected property into an island of white light surrounded by darkness. Every room was photographed, every surface dusted, every scrap of paper cataloged. The cardboard box yielded dozens of newspaper clippings, each neatly trimmed. Someone had followed the investigation with almost obsessive attention. Some articles carried handwritten notes in the margins. Wrong road. Too late. Still looking at the bridge. No signature. No initials. Just those 3 unsettling observations. The Polaroid received even greater attention. Enlarged under laboratory lighting, another detail emerged in the background. Far beyond Emily's abandoned sedan, partially hidden behind heavy rain, stood the faint outline of another vehicle. Not a station wagon. A pickup, dark colored. Only the front corner was visible. Barely enough to identify its shape. Enough to prove Emily's car had not been alone. Cross stared at the enlargement for several minutes. If this photograph was taken before the anonymous call, he said quietly, then whoever held this camera either witnessed what happened or arrived moments afterward. Sheriff Hale nodded and kept silent for years. The investigation, dormant for decades, suddenly had momentum. Cross assembled a new timeline. The abandoned mill, the farmhouse, the anonymous caller, the mysterious photograph. Individually, none solved the mystery. Together, they suggested something far more disturbing. This had never been the work of someone improvising. It had been rehearsed. Every movement appeared calculated. Every clue pointed investigators toward the bridge and away from somewhere else. The question was no longer who took Emily. It had become why was the bridge so important to the deception? 3 days later, Cross returned to the state archives. Boxes filled with forgotten property records lined endless shelves. Most investigators hated archival work. Cross loved it. Paper rarely lied. People did. He searched land ownership records surrounding Mill Creek Bridge. One name appeared repeatedly: Elias Mercer, local businessman, owned the abandoned feed mill, owned the farmhouse, owned several acres surrounding the logging road. He had died in 1993. Natural causes. No criminal history. No connection to Emily Carter recorded anywhere in the original case. Cross frowned. Connections didn't always announce themselves. Sometimes they hid inside ordinary details. He requested Mercer's financial records. Nothing unusual. Tax documents, equipment purchases, insurance claims. Then one canceled check caught his attention. October 9th, 1987, 2 days before Emily disappeared. The check had been written to a small construction company. Purpose: foundation repair, mill office. Cross leaned closer. The mill had been abandoned for years. Why repair the foundation of an empty office? He drove there immediately. Workers had long since disappeared. Nature had reclaimed the property again. Cross walked directly to the office building. Cracked concrete stretched beneath broken windows. He examined the floor. Near one wall, the concrete color changed almost imperceptibly. A newer section. Different texture. Different aggregate. Repaired. Exactly where the invoice described. He knelt, tapped the surface with the handle of his flashlight. Solid. 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 Then, hollow. The sound echoed beneath the concrete. Cross stood without another word. He called Sheriff Hale. "You'd better bring excavation equipment." By sunrise, yellow tape surrounded the building. A small excavator carefully peeled away the repaired concrete, while technicians documented every inch. Nobody spoke. The machine stopped. Workers climbed into the opening. Seconds later, one of them looked upward. "You need to see this." Cross descended the ladder. Below the concrete lay a narrow storage chamber. Old, dry, hidden deliberately. Shelves lined one wall. Most had collapsed. Rusted tools littered the floor. In the far corner rested a metal filing cabinet sealed beneath decades of dust. The lock broke easily. Inside were business ledgers, property deeds, maintenance logs. Nothing extraordinary, until the final drawer. Unlike the others, it contained only one item: a cassette tape, unlabeled. Cross held it carefully. Someone had hidden it beneath fresh concrete, not discarded it, protected it. For whom? Or from whom? Hours later, technicians cleaned the tape enough for playback. The recording began with static, then breathing. Heavy, uneven. A man's voice followed. If anyone ever hears this, static swallowed the next sentence. They weren't supposed to. More interference. Bridge. He changed. The recording abruptly ended. Cross rewound it. Again. Again. Each playback revealed only fragments. No names. No confession. Just enough to suggest someone had tried to leave behind a warning before running out of time. Sheriff Hale looked across the evidence table. "What do you think?" Cross answered without hesitation. "I think somebody knew this would happen." "You mean Emily?" "No." He looked at the cassette. "I think somebody else disappeared." The room fell silent. The original investigation had searched for one missing person. What if there had always been two? That evening, Cross pinned one final photograph onto the evidence board. Emily Carter smiled from a company picnic months before she vanished. Behind her stood several co-workers. Most laughed toward the camera. One man wasn't looking at the photographer. He was looking at Emily, expressionless, almost studying her. Cross had overlooked him countless times. Now something about the image refused to let go. He turned the photograph over. A handwritten caption identified everyone, except him. The final space contained only 2 words. Name unknown. Daniel Cross held the photograph beneath the desk lamp until the edges began to curl from the warmth. Every face in the frame belonged somewhere. Every smile had a name. Every employee had been identified during the original investigation, except one. The man stood half a step behind Emily, almost hidden by the crowd, wearing a faded denim jacket and a plain baseball cap that shaded most of his face. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking. While everyone else looked toward the camera, his attention remained fixed on Emily. Cross had spent years studying crime scene photographs. He knew the danger of reading too much into a frozen moment. A single image could deceive. A glance could mean nothing. But the missing name bothered him more than the expression itself. Investigators had labeled everyone. Why leave one blank? He carried the photograph to the county records office. Margaret Ellis, the retired administrative clerk, had volunteered twice a week ever since leaving full-time employment. If anyone remembered old personnel files, it was Margaret. She adjusted her glasses and studied the photograph for several long seconds. I remember this picnic. Cross remained silent. It was at Hollow Creek Park. She traced a finger across the faded image. That's Frank. That's Louise. That's Emily. Her finger stopped, then slowly moved back. This fellow. You recognize him? I recognize the jacket. The jacket? There weren't many like it around here. She frowned. It belonged to one of the delivery contractors. Name? I can't remember. Did he work for the company? No. He delivered supplies? Sometimes. She looked genuinely frustrated. He wasn't an employee. He just appeared. The answer landed harder than Cross expected. Appeared. The same word Helen Brooks had unconsciously used months earlier when describing the quiet man at the diner. Always there. Never noticed until afterward. The personnel archives occupied an entire basement lined with steel cabinets. Boxes stretched from floor to ceiling. Payroll records. Insurance forms. Visitor logs. Cross spent 2 days turning brittle pages. Late on the second afternoon, he found it. A contractor's sign-in ledger. October 1987. Most names appeared once. A plumber. An electrician. A fuel supplier. One signature. Repeated 7 different times. The handwriting changed slightly with each entry. Sometimes hurried. Sometimes careful. But always the same surname. Keller. No first name. No company. No address. Just Keller. Cross searched every contractor license issued within the county during the 1980s. Nothing. No cahier. No matching business. It was as though the name had existed only inside that ledger. Sheriff Hale listened patiently while Cross laid the records across the conference table. So we have a surname that might not even be real. Cross nodded. And a photograph. And an unidentified man. Hale folded his arms. You think it's enough to reopen interviews? I think it's enough to ask better questions. Blackwater County had changed. Old storefronts had become antique shops. The drive-in theater had disappeared. Children from 1987 now had children of their own, but memory lingered in unexpected places. Cross began visiting former employees one by one. Most remembered Emily. Few remembered the contractor. Then he knocked on the door of retired warehouse foreman Leonard Price. Leonard stared at the photograph for less than 5 seconds. I know him. Cross leaned forward. You do? Not his name. But you've seen him. Twice. Tell me? Leonard rubbed his chin. He never unloaded trucks. Then why was he there? He waited. For who? Emily. The room became very quiet. Did they speak? Once. What happened? I couldn't hear them. Leonard looked out the window, as though replaying the memory. She looked angry. Are you sure? I'd bet my life on it. What about him? He never raised his voice. Then he smiled. Leonard's expression darkened. It wasn't the kind of smile you forget. Cross returned to the photograph with fresh eyes. Until now, everyone had assumed Emily lived an ordinary life. What if the ordinary routine concealed something she had never shared? Not a criminal secret, a personal one, a conflict, an unwanted acquaintance. Someone who had quietly inserted himself into her daily world. Someone patient enough to remain invisible. Another piece arrived unexpectedly. A local newspaper published a short article about the reopened investigation. The following morning, an envelope appeared beneath the sheriff's office door. No stump, no return address. Inside rested a single cassette case. Empty. Folded inside was a handwritten note. You're listening to the wrong tape. Nothing else. No fingerprints. No DNA worth recovering. Just 7 words. Cross read them 3 times. Someone knew about the hidden recording beneath the mill. Someone knew investigators had recovered it. More importantly, someone wanted them to know it wasn't the only recording. By afternoon, the evidence room resembled controlled chaos. Maps covered the walls. Photographs overlapped timelines. The contractor ledger sat beside the anonymous note. Cross stepped backward, searching for the connection that refused to reveal itself. Then he saw it. Not on the wall, on the floor. The cardboard evidence boxes had been arranged in chronological order. October, November, December. One box was missing. Not misplaced. Missing. Evidence box 22. He checked the inventory sheet. The missing box had been logged decades earlier. Contents: audio materials, miscellaneous documents, recovered from vehicle. Cross's heartbeat accelerated. The tape. Sheriff Hale looked up. What? The hidden cassette wasn't the first one. Cross grabbed the inventory ledger. Years ago, somebody collected audio evidence from Emily's car. And now the entire box is gone. They searched every shelf, every cabinet. Nothing. No transfer record. No destruction order. No loan form. The evidence had vanished long before Cross reopened the case, which meant someone had known exactly what to remove, long before anyone realized it mattered. Cross slowly closed the inventory book. This investigation didn't go cold by accident. Sheriff Hale met his eyes. You think someone has been managing it? Cross nodded once. For years. Outside, evening settled over Blackwater County. Streetlights flickered on. Traffic thinned. From a distance, the town looked as peaceful as it always had. But somewhere beyond the glow of those lights, someone had just learned that Daniel Cross was asking questions no one had asked in nearly 40 years. And for the first time since Emily Carter vanished, that someone had started making mistakes. Morning arrived beneath a ceiling of low-gray clouds, but Blackwater County was already awake. The story had spread faster than anyone inside the sheriff's office expected. People whispered that detectives had found new evidence. Others claimed a confession was imminent. By sunrise, reporters had gathered outside the courthouse with cameras pointed toward the entrance, hoping to catch a glimpse of Daniel Cross. He slipped through a side door instead, carrying nothing more than a worn leather briefcase and a growing certainty that someone was watching every move he made. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. This no longer felt like the reopening of an old missing person case. It felt like someone had disturbed something that had been carefully buried. Cross unlocked his office. His desk looked exactly as he had left it. The evidence board remained untouched. The contractor ledger sat open beneath the lamp. Yet something felt wrong. He stood motionless. The room was silent. His eyes drifted across the shelves until they stopped on a legal pad lying beside the window. He never left it there. Cross picked it up. Every page was blank, except the last. Indented into the paper, not written with ink, but pressed hard enough to leave an impression, were 3 words. Stop digging, Daniel. He stared at them without moving. No forced entry. No broken lock. Whoever had entered knew exactly how to avoid attention. More unsettling still, they knew his first name. The building was immediately searched. Security footage from the previous night showed nothing unusual. One camera had inexplicably lost power for 17 minutes. Another recorded only static. The maintenance supervisor insisted there had been no electrical problems anywhere else in the building. Cross wasn't surprised. If someone had removed evidence box 22 years earlier without leaving a trace, disabling a camera for a few minutes would hardly be beyond their abilities. Sheriff Hale folded his arms. We keep this quiet. Cross nodded. If word gets out, whoever left the message disappears. Neither man needed to finish the sentence. That afternoon, the state laboratory called. The glass marble recovered from the abandoned feed mill had finally produced a result, not fingerprints. The surface was too worn. Instead, Technicians identified microscopic traces of blue industrial paint embedded inside tiny scratches across the glass. The paint formula matched equipment manufactured during the late 1970s. One customer had purchased large quantities of that exact coating. Blackwater Marine Works. Cross pulled the company file. The business had closed in 1991 after filing for bankruptcy. Its warehouses overlooked the river nearly 15 miles south of town. More interestingly, Blackwater Marine Works had once shared a freight contract with the abandoned feed mill. Two forgotten businesses. One transportation route. One overlapping history. Too much to dismiss. The warehouse stood at the edge of the river, its rusting steel walls reflecting dull afternoon light. Most windows had shattered decades earlier. The loading docks leaned toward the water like exhausted giants. Cross entered through a side door, hanging crooked on a single hinge. Inside, echoes swallowed every sound. Rows of empty shelving stretched into darkness. Old forklifts sat where operators had abandoned them years before. Near the rear wall, faded tire marks remained visible beneath layers of dust. He followed them. The tracks ended beside a freight elevator. Out of service, or so the warning sign claimed. Cross examined the controls. The buttons had been removed. Someone didn't want the elevator operating. He shined his flashlight downward through a narrow gap. The shaft descended farther than expected. Much farther. The warehouse records described only 2 floors. This shaft reached at least 3. He requested structural blueprints from the county archives. An hour later, they arrived. Cross spread them across the hood of his truck. There it was. A basement. Officially listed as temporary storage during construction. Later blueprints omitted it entirely. No explanation. No demolition permits. No engineering reports. Just gone. Sheriff Hale looked over his shoulder. Think it's still there? Cross folded the drawings. Only one way to find out. The next morning, engineers forced open the elevator mechanism. After hours of work, the platform groaned to life for the first time in decades. It descended slowly into darkness. Dust drifted through the flashlight beams. The air grew colder. Then, the elevator stopped. Concrete, steel, silence. The basement existed exactly where the original plans placed it. Rows of abandoned storage cages lined both walls. Most stood open, empty. One remained locked. The chain had rusted almost completely through. A technician cut it. The gate swung inward. Inside sat nothing more than an old wooden desk, a chair, and a tape recorder. Cross approached carefully. The recorder was coated in dust, but unlike everything else nearby, the batteries were missing. Someone had removed them. Recently, he opened the cassette compartment. Empty. No tape. Only a folded sheet of paper tucked beneath the mechanism. Cross unfolded it. The handwriting matched the anonymous note delivered to the sheriff's office. Neat. Deliberate. Confident. It contained a single sentence. You were never supposed to find this room. Sheriff Hale looked around slowly. Whoever wrote that knew he'd come. Cross nodded. They've always known. As crime scene technicians photographed the basement, one called from the far corner. There are markings over here. Cross walked across. At first, they resembled random scratches on the wall. Then the flashlight caught them at the right angle. Dates. Dozens of dates. Carved one beneath another. 1984. 1985. 1986. 1987. The carving stopped abruptly 3 days after Emily Carter disappeared. Below the final date, someone had carved one final line. Not deeply. Just enough to survive. He always comes back. No signature. No explanation. Just those 4 words. Cross ran his fingers lightly across the grooves. For the first time since reopening the investigation, he felt something unfamiliar. Not excitement. Not determination. Dread. Because mysteries usually became smaller as evidence accumulated. This one was becoming larger. Every answer uncovered another hidden room. Another missing tape. Another anonymous warning. Another person who seemed to know far more than they had ever admitted. As the team prepared to leave, Cross took one last look around the basement. His flashlight paused on the ceiling. Fresh footprints. Directly above the storage cage. Someone had stood there recently, looking down through a narrow ventilation grate, watching, listening, waiting. Whoever had left the warnings hadn't simply been following the investigation. They had been one step ahead of it all along. Daniel Cross climbed back into the daylight with a feeling he had learned never to ignore. Someone wasn't merely preserving an old secret. Someone was curating it. The hidden basement, the missing cassette, the anonymous notes, the carefully removed evidence box. None of it looked like panic. Panic was messy. Panic left fingerprints. This was discipline. Years of discipline. Back at the sheriff's office, Cross spread every anonymous message across his desk. Stop digging, Daniel. You're listening to the wrong tape. You were never supposed to find this room. He studied the handwriting for nearly an hour. The letters were remarkably consistent. Measured spacing. Even pressure. No hesitation. Someone accustomed to writing carefully. Not because they feared making mistakes. Because they understood that every detail mattered. Cross wasn't looking at the words anymore. He was looking at the spaces between them. Then something clicked. The writer never used contractions. Never wrote don't. Never wrote you're naturally. Instead, each contraction appeared deliberately formed, as though copied from memory rather than habit. It suggested someone who had trained themselves to disguise their normal handwriting. But people rarely disguise punctuation. The period sat unusually high above the writing line. The lowercase t remained uncrossed until the end of each sentence. Tiny habits, the kind experts noticed. Cross sealed the notes inside fresh evidence sleeves. Let's see what a document examiner thinks. 3 days later, the report arrived. No identification, no match, but one observation stood out. The examiner believed the anonymous writer had likely learned penmanship before the widespread adoption of ballpoint pens. Someone older, someone educated, someone patient. Cross leaned back in his chair. Older narrowed the field. Patient narrowed it further. Late that afternoon, Margaret Ellis called unexpectedly. I found something. Cross drove to the records office immediately. Margaret slid a dusty ledger across the table. I remember we kept visitor logs separately from payroll. Cross opened the book. Delivery drivers, inspectors, insurance agents, state auditors. Then one recurring entry caught his attention. Whittaker, purpose of visit, records review. The visits occurred every 6 months, for nearly 15 years. What records? Cross asked. Margaret shook her head. They never wrote that down. When did the visit stop? She turned to the final page. 1 month after Emily disappeared. Cross looked at her. Did anyone ever ask about Whittaker? No. Do you remember him? Margaret hesitated. Barely. What do you remember? He always carried a leather briefcase. Anything else? He limped. Cross searched every county employment record. Nothing. Property records. Nothing. Business licenses. Nothing. It was as if R. Whittaker had walked into Blackwater County every 6 months for 15 years and left no footprint beyond a visitor log. That evening, Sheriff Hale received another anonymous envelope. No fingerprints. No return address. Inside rested a single black and white photograph. The courthouse, taken from across the street. At first glance, it appeared ordinary. Then Cross noticed the timestamp. It had been taken earlier that morning. The front entrance stood clearly visible. So did Daniel Cross. Walking into the building, the message required no words. Someone wasn't remembering him. Someone was watching him now. For the first time since reopening the investigation, Hale assigned a deputy to quietly observe Cross whenever he left the office. Cross hated it, not because he feared danger, because it confirmed the balance had shifted. The unknown observer had stopped reacting. Now they were directing the game. The breakthrough came from somewhere no one expected. Helen Brooks closed Mason's Diner for good after 42 years. Before selling the building, she invited Cross to look through anything left behind. Take whatever helps. The basement storage room smelled of cardboard and old coffee. Boxes filled with forgotten menus, receipts, broken appliances, and decades of clutter surrounded him. Near the back wall sat a cracked plastic container labeled simply, "Found items." Inside were wallets never claimed, house keys, children's toys, pocket knives, coins. Nothing remarkable, until Cross discovered a small spiral notebook wrapped inside a rubber band. The first page listed pie orders. The second contained grocery reminders. The remaining pages held license plate numbers. Hundreds of them, dates beside each. Helen frowned. "Oh, you've seen this." She nodded slowly. One of the waitresses kept writing down suspicious cars. Cross looked up instantly. Suspicious? We'd had a string of gas thefts back then, so employees started recording unfamiliar vehicles, just in case. Cross turned page after page. Most plates appeared once, some twice. Then, one partial plate appeared 14 different times over 3 months, always beginning with the same 3 characters. For kilojoules, different final numbers. Or perhaps the waitress never finished writing them. Cross's pulse quickened. The dates matched almost perfectly with Emily's regular visits. What happened to the waitress? Helen smiled sadly. She moved away years ago. Do you remember where? I think. She closed her eyes. North Carolina. Cross carefully closed a notebook. For the first time in weeks, he possessed something tangible. Not a rumor, not a theory. A pattern recorded before anyone knew a crime had occurred. That night, alone in his office, Cross pinned one final item to the evidence board. Not a photograph, not a map, the spiral notebook. He stepped backward. The wall had become a mosaic of disconnected truths. The bridge, the feed mill, the warehouse basement, the hidden chamber, the contractor named Keller, the mysterious Whitaker, the anonymous observer, the repeated license plate. Each clue seemed to point in a different direction, until he stopped trying to connect places. Instead, he connected time. Colored strings moved, pins shifted, dates aligned. Suddenly the chaos disappeared. Every significant event occurred on the second Friday of the month. Every sighting, every mysterious visit, every unexplained vehicle, every records inspection, even Emily's final meeting. Cross stared at the timeline in disbelief. It couldn't be coincidence. Someone had been operating according to a schedule that still hadn't ended. He checked the calendar hanging beside his desk. Tomorrow, that was the second Friday of the month. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, Daniel Cross wasn't chasing a ghost from the past. He was waiting for someone who might still be following the same routine. And somewhere beyond the courthouse windows, hidden in the darkness beyond the streetlights of Blackwater County, another pair of eyes was almost certainly checking that same calendar. Daniel Cross arrived at the courthouse before sunrise. The streets of Blackwater County were empty except for a newspaper truck making its usual rounds. A thin layer of fog drifted across Main Street, softening the outlines of storefronts that had stood unchanged for decades. It would have looked peaceful to anyone passing through. Cross no longer believed in peaceful mornings. He unlocked the evidence room, switched on a single lamp, and pinned a fresh county map beside the growing web of photographs and notes. The second Friday had finally arrived. If the pattern meant anything, today someone would move, not because Cross had forced them, because routines were difficult to abandon. People changed addresses. They changed jobs. They changed names, but habits survived, especially the ones repeated for years. By 7 o'clock, 4 unmarked vehicles quietly positioned themselves around town. No flashing lights, no uniforms standing on corners, just deputies drinking coffee inside parked pickups, watching intersections that had become strangely important after Cross rebuilt the timeline. The courthouse, Mason's Diner, the old feed mill, Mill Creek Bridge. Cross had no suspect, no guarant, only a theory. Sometimes that was enough to catch someone making a mistake. Hours passed. Nothing. Traffic remained light. Locals waved to one another exactly as they always had. A mail carrier stopped outside the pharmacy. School buses disappeared toward the north end of the county. By noon, even Sheriff Hale began to doubt the plan. We may be waiting for a ghost. Cross kept watching the road through binoculars. Ghosts don't send photographs. At 12:43 p.m., Deputy Morgan's radio crackled. "I've got a vehicle." Cross grabbed the microphone. "Describe it." "Dark green pickup." "Direction?" "Heading east toward Mill Creek." "License?" "Partial only." A pause. Point 4. "Yeah." Every conversation inside the command room stopped. The notebook from Mason's diner. The repeated plate. 4. KJ. Cross was already moving. The pickup maintained the speed limit. No sudden turns. No obvious attempt to flee. It drove like someone with absolutely nothing to hide. Cross stayed several hundred yards behind, while 2 unmarked units approached from different directions. The truck crossed Mill Creek Bridge, continued another mile, then unexpectedly turned into the abandoned parking lot of a shuttered produce market. The driver stepped out. Male, late 60s, gray beard, work boots. He carried a small cardboard box beneath one arm. Cross exited his vehicle slowly. "Morning." The man smiled politely. "Afternoon. You mind if we talk?" "Depends." "On what?" "Whether this is about the bridge." Cross felt a chill despite the heat. "You know the bridge?" "I've driven across it most of my life." The answer came too quickly, too prepared. Cross glanced toward the cardboard box. "What's inside?" The man looked down. "Old papers." "Mind opening it?" Without hesitation, the stranger sat on the hood of his truck. Inside lay faded receipts, fishing magazines, rusted tools. Nothing remarkable, almost too unremarkable. Cross introduced himself. The man nodded. "I know who you are." "Have we met?" "No." "Then how?" "I read the papers." Another easy answer. Another practiced smile. Cross asked for identification. The driver's license identified him as Walter Grayson, a retired mechanic living alone outside the county line. Everything checked out. No guarants. No violent history. Nothing connected him to Emily Carter. Yet before leaving, Walter paused beside the driver's door. "You know something?" Cross waited. Sometimes people spend so long looking for monsters. They forget ordinary men can do extraordinary things. He climbed into the pickup and drove away. Cross watched until the taillights disappeared. Sheriff Hale walked over. "You think it's him?" Cross answered honestly. "I don't know." It bothered him even more that Walter hadn't seemed nervous. He had seemed curious, as though he wanted to measure the investigator standing in front of him. That evening, Cross returned to his office frustrated. The operation had produced no arrest, no confession, only another conversation that felt strangely incomplete. He replayed every word in his mind. Then he stopped. Walter had said something unusual. "Is this about the bridge?" Cross had never mentioned the bridge. Neither had the deputies. The man introduced himself. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Before Cross could explore the thought further, dispatch called. A construction crew renovating the old county library had discovered a locked storage room hidden behind a false wall. The room contained decades of forgotten records scheduled for disposal. Among them, boxes marked with the sheriff's department seal. Cross reached the library within 20 minutes. Dust coated everything. The foreman pointed toward 3 water-damaged cartons stacked beneath broken shelves. "We almost threw them away." Cross carefully lifted the first lid. Old arrest reports, property inventories, traffic citations. The second box held flood-damaged correspondence. The third stopped him cold. Across the faded label, barely visible beneath mold stains, someone had handwritten, "Evidence transfer, October 1987. Sheriff Hale slowly exhaled. "I thought every transfer record was gone." "So did I." Inside the box rested dozens of routine documents. Nothing immediately connected to Emily. Cross kept digging. Near the bottom, he found a thin manila envelope. Empty. except for a typed inventory sheet. One line had been crossed out in black marker, not neatly, violently. The paper had almost torn. Cross tilted it toward the light. Beneath the marker, faint letters remained visible. Audio. Cassette. Interview. He looked at Hale. There was another recording. Hale no did grimly. And someone made sure nobody listened to it. As technicians photographed the discovery, Cross noticed a small number stamped in the lower corner of the inventory sheet. He checked the remaining documents. Several carried identical shelf references, not evidence locations. Archifalochatians, meaning copies. Someone had archived investigative material outside the sheriff's office decades earlier. If this envelope survived, perhaps other copies had too. Cross folded the paper carefully. The investigation had reached another fork in the road. For years he believed the truth had been erased. Now it appeared something far stranger had happened. Pieces of it had simply been scattered, hidden in forgotten rooms, misfiled, ignored, waiting for someone patient enough to assemble them again. As the last box was loaded into an evidence van, Cross glanced toward the library entrance. Across the street, beyond the caution tape, a lone figure stood beneath a bus stop shelter. Dark coat, baseball cap, hands in pockets. Watching. Cross blinked. A passing truck blocked his view for barely 2 seconds. When it cleared, the shelter was empty. No footsteps. No vehicle pulling away. Nothing. Only a single folded newspaper resting on the bench where the stranger had been standing. Cross crossed the street and picked it up. The front page carried that morning's headline about the reopened investigation. One sentence had been circled in thick black ink. Some truths survive because they want to be found. Daniel Cross folded the newspaper with deliberate care. The ink from the circled sentence had not completely dried. When his thumb brushed the edge of the page, a faint black smear marked the skin. Fresh. Whoever had left it had been standing there only moments before. He scanned both directions along Main Street. A florist carried buckets of roses. Inside her shop, a delivery van rolled through the next intersection. 2 teenagers laughed as they crossed toward the movie theater. No baseball cap, no dark coat, no face lingering long enough to remember. Cross slipped the newspaper into an evidence sleeve. He had learned long ago that people obsessed over fingerprints and overlooked intention. The message mattered more than the paper. Some truths survive because they want to be found. Not a threat. Not exactly. It sounded almost like permission. Back at the sheriff's office, the newly recovered archive box was spread across a long conference table. Most of the files contained routine administrative paperwork, transfer receipts, vehicle maintenance logs, evidence custody forms, boring documents, the kind investigators skim before filing away forever. Cross-read every line. Patterns often hid inside boredom. Near the bottom of one stack, he discovered a routing slip with 4 signatures. 3 belonged to deputies assigned to the case in 1987. The 4th had been signed simply. Ervu, not a full name, just initials. Cross compared the handwriting to the visitor ledger that listed R. Whitaker. The strokes matched almost perfectly. Sheriff Hale leaned over his shoulder. You think Whitaker handled evidence? I think Whitaker had access to it. Officially? Cross shook his head. That's what worries me. The county archives yielded another surprise. Margaret Ellis called shortly after sunset. I found one more box. Cross arrived within minutes. Unlike the others, this carton had never belonged to the sheriff's office. It came from the courthouse basement after a flood nearly 20 years earlier. Inside rested old planning documents, insurance maps, and utility records. Most were worthless. One blueprint wasn't. It showed the original telephone network installed throughout Blackwater County in the early 1980s. Cross traced the lines with his finger. The anonymous call reporting Emily's abandoned car had originated from a payphone outside an abandoned convenience store. That much had always been known. What investigators had never noticed was another notation in the margin. Maintenance bypass installed. A secondary cable connected the payphone to an old switching cabinet near the railway depot. It wasn't standard. It wasn't even documented anywhere else. Cross frowned. Why would a single payphone need a backup route? Margaret answered quietly. It wouldn't. The switching cabinet still stood behind the abandoned depot. Rust covered its doors. Weeds reached almost to the handles. A communications technician pried it open. Bundles of aging cables filled the interior. Most had long since been disconnected. One remained intact. Recently, its insulation looked newer than everything surrounding it. Someone had replaced it years after the rest of the system had been abandoned. The technician looked up. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Cross followed the cable. It disappeared underground, not toward the convenience store, toward the courthouse. Silence settled inside the command room after the discovery. Sheriff Hale unfolded the map again. So someone maintained a private line? Looks that way. For what purpose? Cross didn't answer immediately. He stared at the thin blue line, connecting forgotten places across town. If you controlled the line, you could make a call appear to come from somewhere else. The room became still. The anonymous call. The foundation of the entire investigation. What if investigators had never known where it truly originated? Forensic technicians spent the next day tracing the abandoned circuit. It terminated inside a storage room beneath the original courthouse annex, a section demolished years earlier during renovations. The room itself no longer existed. Only fragments of the conduit remained trapped inside concrete. Whatever equipment had once been installed there had vanished decades ago. Deliberately removed. Another carefully erased piece of history. Cross rubbed tired eyes. Every discovery seemed to arrive half complete. Enough to prove something important had happened. Never enough to reveal exactly what. Late that evening, as he prepared to leave, the front desk deputy called upstairs. Detective. Cross looked over the railing. You've got a visitor. An elderly woman stood quietly inside the lobby. She wore a navy raincoat, despite the clear weather outside. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back. She carried a small wooden box wrapped in faded cloth. My name is Eleanor Price, she said softly. Cross recognized the surname immediately. Leonard Price, the retired warehouse foreman. My husband passed away last winter. Cross nodded respectfully. I remember. She placed the wooden box on the counter. He told me that if anyone ever reopened Emily Carter's case, that this belonged to you. Cross slowly lifted the lid. Inside rested an old pocket watch. Stopped forever at 6:41. Beneath it lay a folded note written in Leonard's unmistakable handwriting. I never stopped thinking about the man in the denim jacket. I remembered one more thing. He wasn't watching Emily. He was watching someone behind her. Cross read the sentence twice. Then a third time. His pulse quickened. For nearly 40 years, everyone, including Cross himself, had assumed the unknown man was focused on Emily. What if the photograph had been misleading? He spread the company picnic photograph across his desk once more. This time he ignored Emily completely. Instead, he examined every face standing behind her. One by one, near the back of the crowd, partially hidden by a folding table, stood another figure almost cropped out of frame. A man wearing a white work shirt, looking directly toward the stranger in the denim jacket, not smiling, not talking, just watching him back. The original caption identified him only as temporary records consultant. No name, no personnel number, no additional information, only two initials typed beside the title. Ervu. Daniel Cross slowly lowered the photograph. For the first time since reopening the case, two separate mysteries had finally touched. The unidentified contractor, the mysterious records consultant, the initials that appeared on forgotten evidence transfers, the visitor who had reviewed county files every 6 months. They were no longer scatter clues. They were part of the same story. The only question left was whether R.W. had been trying to protect the truth, or bury it forever. Daniel Cross locked the office door behind him. The courthouse had emptied hours earlier. Outside, the courthouse clock struck 9, each chime echoing across the quiet streets before dissolving into the humid Florida night. The evidence board filled nearly an entire wall now. Photographs overlapped maps. Timelines crossed handwritten notes. Red string no longer connected people to places. It connected questions to other questions. Cross pinned in large picnic photograph beside the recovered visitor log. The initials matched. Ervu, records consultant. Evidence transfer signature. Regular visitor. A man with access. A man with no history. It was impossible. No government employee could simply vanish from every official record. Unless he never worked for the government. Cross reached for the county budget ledgers. Independent contractors. Consultants. Auditors. Outside investigators. They were paid differently. Different paperwork. Different archives. He searched until midnight. Nothing. Not a single payment. Not one invoice. Not one reimbursement. He leaned back in his chair. Someone erased you. The words barely escaped above a whisper. The next morning, Margaret Ellis called again. I remembered where old contract files were stored. Cross was already grabbing his jacket. They weren't kept with payroll. Where? The courthouse attic. I thought it was sealed. It was. She smiled faintly. So was everything else you've been finding. The attic stretched above the oldest wing of the courthouse. Dust coated every beam. Thousands of forgotten files filled wooden shelves that hadn't been touched in decades. Sunlight filtered through broken vents, cutting pale columns across the darkness. Cross worked methodically, year by year, shelf by shelf. 1985. Nothing. 1986. Nothing. 1987. Near the back, hidden behind boxes labeled tax appeals, he found a thin accordion folder without any official markings. Inside were only 3 documents: a temporary access authorization, a visitor badge request, a confidentiality agreement. Every page referred to the same individual, Robert Whitaker. At last, a full name, except the signature line was blank. The photograph box was empty. The address field had been cut away with a razor blade. Cross-examined the edges. Not torn. Removed carefully. Someone had wanted the name to survive. Nothing else. Sheriff Hale read the documents twice. So he existed. Yes. But someone stripped away every identifying detail. Hale looked toward the evidence wall. Why leave the name? Cross answered without hesitation. Because a name without a face is almost useless. The state archives produced one final surprise. An old insurance roster listed every vehicle registered to courthouse personnel during the late 1980s. Cross almost skipped it. Then he froze. One entry stood out. Vehicle type: 1981 dark green pickup. Owner: temporary contract assignment. Driver: Whitaker. Cross slowly closed the folder. The same color described by Deputy Morgan. The same vehicle type seen in the old Polaroid. The same initials appearing across forgotten records. For the first time, multiple pieces aligned without forcing them. Not proof, but direction. He requested a nationwide search for Robert Whitaker. Hundreds of results appeared. Teachers, veterans, salesmen, retired electricians. None matched. No photograph resembled the man in the picnic image. No employment history fit. It was as though Robert Whitaker had borrowed a real name, Dot or someone else's. That evening, Cross returned to Leonard Price's handwritten note. One sentence refused to leave his thoughts. He wasn't watching Emily. He was watching someone behind her. Cross enlarged the picnic photograph again. Then again. Grain overtook detail. Faces dissolved into blocks of gray, until one reflection caught his eye. The polished chrome bumper of a parked truck reflected part of the gathering from another angle. Tiny, almost invisible. He scanned it digitally. The image sharpened just enough. The mysterious man in the denim jacket wasn't standing still. He was turning, looking over his shoulder, at someone outside the frame, someone the photographer had never intended to capture. Cross-checked every negative recovered from the company picnic. There had been 12 photographs taken that afternoon. Only 7 survived. 5 were missing. Not damaged. Missing. Who had the originals? Hale asked. The company. And after it closed? Cross looked at the file. Everything went to storage. Where? No idea. 3 days later, a former bankruptcy trustee returned Cross's phone call. Most company property had been auctioned. Furniture, equipment, vehicles. The remaining paper archives had been purchased as scrap by a recycling warehouse outside Jacksonville. Cross's heart sank. Do they still exist? I doubt it. Worth checking. The trustee hesitated. There was one thing they didn't recycle. What? The photograph negatives. Why not? They were inside a separate safety envelope. I honestly don't know. That night, Daniel Cross stayed alone in his office long after everyone else left. The courthouse had settled into silence. He spread the investigation across his desk one final time. The denim jacket, Robert Whitaker, the hidden basement, the anonymous notes, the missing cassette, the erased evidence. Every discovery pointed towards someone who had spent decades controlling information instead of destroying it. A strange strategy, unless the objective had never been to eliminate the truth, only to delay it. Cross stared at the wall. Then his eyes widened. Delay, not destroy. He hurried to the archive inventory. Evidence box 22. Gone. Photograph negatives. Gone. Original contract file. Partially removed. Cassette. Missing. None completely erased. Only separated. Scattered. Someone had broken the story into pieces and hidden each piece somewhere different. Not because they feared discovery. Because no single piece made sense alone. Only after years of patient work could someone assemble the complete picture, which raised one terrifying possibility. What if that had been intentional? What if someone inside the mystery had expected another investigator to eventually find every fragment? A knock interrupted his thoughts. 3 slow taps. Cross opened the office door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No voices. Only a small envelope resting on the floor. Inside was a single Polaroid. Fresh. Taken less than an hour earlier. It showed Daniel Cross sitting alone at his desk. The photograph had been taken through his office window from somewhere across the street. Written across the white border in neat black ink were 6 words. You're finally asking the right question. Daniel Cross didn't move. The Polaroid rested in his hands, its glossy surface still carrying the faint chemical smell of fresh development. Whoever had taken the picture hadn't mailed it. They hadn't waited until morning. They had crossed the street, watched him through the office window, printed the photograph, and returned to the courthouse, all without being seen. That meant one thing. They wanted him to know exactly how close they could get, not to frighten him, to communicate. Cross laid the photograph beside the others. Each anonymous message had followed the same pattern. No demands, no ransom, no direct threats, only corrections, only nudges, as though someone invisible kept steering the investigation whenever it drifted away from the truth. He wrote a single sentence across the top of his legal pad. What the anonymous sender wants the case solved. The thought felt absurd, until he looked at the evidence again. The hidden basement had led to the cassette. The newspaper had led to the archive box. The notes had forced him to question old assumptions. Every anonymous clue had moved the investigation forward, never backward. Sheriff Hale arrived before dawn. Cross handed him the latest Polaroid.